Good morning, everyone, and thanks for being with us here on Facebook Live and WKRN.com. In just a minute here, it looks like the Knox County DA is expected to make a statement about the shooting at Austin East High School that happened earlier this week. A student killed and a police officer wounded there. It looks like the DA is already talking, so let's listen in.
Questions? Many of you have requested the body camera evidence from this particular incident. And so instead of answering you piecemeal and responding, I wanted to just bring you all together and one time explain to everybody what my position is and why I have that position. So that's kind of the roadmap for where I'd like to go. I understand that the community, the press, the citizens want to see the body camera evidence in this case. I understand that. As a human being, I understand that. As I stand here as Charme Allen, the person, I want to give you that. I want to answer all your questions. I want to show you the video. However, I don't stand here as Charme Allen, the person. I stand here as Charme Allen, the elected District Attorney General, whose job is to protect the criminal potential integrity of this case. I have to be mindful of a potential criminal prosecution, and that has to trump and come first. I agree that the community has a right to see this. I agree that you, as the press, have a right to see this. It's just a timing issue. You will see the body camera evidence at some point. The community will see that. Everybody is entitled and allowed to see the body camera footage in this particular case. However, it has to be done in the appropriate time. Before you are allowed to see that, it has to complete its function as criminal evidence. Okay? Currently, the TBI is investigating this case. It is currently an active criminal investigation. We are not even 72 hours out from the actual shooting. There are still many interviews being conducted. There's evidence being collected. There's forensic evidence being collected. All of that is happening. To release any part of the evidence in this case before we have collected all the evidence may taint things that are still being done. You can understand that we are still taking statements from witnesses at this point. All of the officers involved in this shooting have not given a statement yet. To release the video, for it to be out there to be viewed by potential witnesses before they give statements, could potentially taint the criminal integrity of this case. So I cannot release that body camera video at this point, because of the stage we are in this criminal collection of evidence process. There are rules that govern what can and can't be released in a criminal prosecution. There are ethical rules. There are statutes. There are juvenile statutes dealing with the release of juvenile footage. There, ethically, as a lawyer, I am guided by ethically what I can and can't release in terms of keeping my license, in terms of protecting this case. There are rules abundant as to why I can't release this footage. And there are reasons for those rules. I don't want to skip over the fact that those rules are there for privacy rights. The individuals involved in this case have privacy rights. We want to protect privacy rights in this country. We also have to protect the due process of law. If someone is ultimately charged with a criminal act, they are allowed the right to due process where the case cannot be tried in the public or in the press prior to it being tried in the courtroom. There is the possibility, because of these laws, if we release this body cam footage, there's the possibility that we could violate a law to where we could not use it in the trial if we were to go to trial. And ultimately, that's what we want in the criminal justice process. We want to determine whether or not a crime has been committed And if a crime has been committed, we want to be able to produce the very best evidence we can possibly produce at the trial phase, because we want to hold those guilty of crimes accountable. If we can't use that evidence to hold them accountable, the evidence is no good. So every single time I will err on the side of the law over the demand of public opinion and demand. That's just my job. That's what you elected me to do, and that's what we're going to do. In regards to my job, I want to just go over a little bit of the procedure of what is actually happening right now. Right now, as you know, the TBI comes in here as an independent law enforcement review body when Knox County Sheriff's Office or KPD are involved in an officer-involved shooting. TBI is investigating this case. They collect all the evidence and they present that evidence to my office. They are still early on in the investigation and the collection of evidence. Let me reiterate that in this case. Once they collect that evidence, what happens is they then send all of that to our office. My office, once I have the evidence, is then charged with reviewing all that evidence to determine whether or not a crime was committed. Here, no question, there was a homicide of Anthony Thompson. Our job is to determine whether or not that was a lawful or an unlawful homicide. We use TBI's evidence to do that. One of two things can happen once our office makes that review. If there is a criminal charge that is levied, what happens is we indict that case, it goes to trial, and the evidence, including the body camera evidence, is protected until we go to trial. And it will be released at trial as evidence. And so everyone will see it at that phase. If the case goes the other way and we determine it is not an unjust or unlawful homicide, that if it is a justifiable homicide and there are no criminal charges, what happens at that point is the same thing that we have always done in these officer-involved shootings. Many of you have been a part of this in the past, where we have cleared an officer-involved shooting. Our policy and procedure has always been at that point to have a full and open press conference where we release all evidence. We go over it with you, we show the evidence, we explain the evidence, we answer questions until you have no more questions. And we also give each of you a disc or a packet with all the evidence in it, so you are all free to take it back to all your news stations and review that and report on anything that you want out of those files. That is what will happen in this case. If we determine there are no charges, we determine there are charges, it'll go to trial. That's when the evidence, all the evidence, the forensic evidence, the statements, and the body camera evidence will all be released at the same time. Now, I do want to say that, as is my office policy, I never release body camera footage of a homicide in an officer-involved shooting without letting the family view that first. We're talking about a 17-year-old kid who has a family, who loved him very much. And before I would ever release the video showing his homicide to the public, to the press, to anyone, I would sit with that family, I would talk with that family, I would answer all of their questions first, and I would let them view that video in the privacy of my office as many times as they wanted to see it before it would be released. So that has not happened yet either. I have reached out to the family, I have spoken with the family's attorney, and the family has expressed their gratitude for the fact that we have committed to sit down with them at every step of this proceeding and talk to them first. So that's another thing that will have to happen before the public sees this video. For the same reasons that I've talked about protecting the video, that really applies to all the questions you guys have been asking too, because you're asking very detailed, very good, but very detailed questions about evidentiary issues in this case. And those same rules that prohibit me from being able to release anything to you prohibit me from being able to talk to you about those. If we mess up and talk about something we shouldn't, that might affect any potential criminal charge down the road if one should arise. So, because of that, I'm not going to be able to take questions at this point. I have told you just about everything legally that I can tell you right now, and I hope that it helps you understand where we are, where we're going, and why we are doing that. So I appreciate you all for being here this morning. Thank you.
Just one clarification, if you can. You said that the video will be released at some point, just not yet. Will it only be released in one of those two options, either at trial or at the conclusion of the TBI investigation? Or could it be released before then, depending on how it works?
We will have to make a determination whether to charge or not charge. And we cover the two ways that goes, if we make a charging decision or if we don't make a charging decision.
And at that point, that's when the video will be released?
Yes. And the video will only be released after the family has had an opportunity to view it.
Can you speak to how careful this office has been in evidence collection and not letting things get out, and how Director Roush came out Monday and gave out misinformation just a few hours after the shooting? Can you speak to that? Because that's a pretty big deal in public.
I will speak to that, and this is all I want to say about that, but I will speak to it. That is a perfect example of why we, when we're investigating a case, should not answer questions, should not talk to you, should not tell you things that we think are true. Because things change in an investigation. New information comes in, things change. We taint further information by releasing information. So no, information should not be released on a criminal case, and that is a perfect example of how information was released. It was released too early, it was incorrect, then additional information had to be released to correct that. That's a perfect example. Thank you for the question, because that's a real world example of exactly what I'm trying to explain to you. The criminal justice process wants to prevent just that, because they want to protect the integrity of the criminal trial if someone is actually charged. Our Constitution demands that. Our United States Constitution and our state constitution. So that is why this office is so careful. We will always err on the side of the law and following the law. So thank you. I appreciate you guys being here.
Thank you.
All right, that wraps up that news conference with the Knox County District Attorney. As you heard, she said she will not be releasing the body camera video right now that shows that shooting that killed a student and injured an officer in Knoxville earlier this week. Charme Allen saying this is an ongoing case, and there was a homicide of 17-year-old Anthony Thompson, so they are working to determine if that was a lawful or unlawful homicide and if anyone will be charged. So she says at this point, if there's a trial, it will be released at trial. Now, if it's not released at trial as no one is charged, once that officer-involved shooting is cleared and the family has had a chance to view that video, then it will be made public. So she does say releasing it could violate some laws and could actually cause an issue at the trial. So again, the Knox County District Attorney saying right now that video is not going to be released.